I will say this is slowly, looking at the rest of the schedule, this is slowly turning into the biggest game on Sunday now, because all these games are being moved around and Lamar Jackson also might be out. I advocated for Texans Jags. I would like to put that out here into the universe. I advocated for us to talk Texans.
Well, that
Jags.
was not the direct replacement for this game. In fairness, that was Dolphins Jets. And we had to give a shout out to our Miami fam. Come on. The fan base that oddly supported us the most, the one that had us ranked on Google search. I was like, okay, I see you, Miami Dolphins fans. We're with it. Even though Kyle's mentioning your
By the way, I love that the internet this week created a name for the Dolphins fans that are like aggressively pro Tua, that they are now called Tuanon. And I like that. I hope Tuanon comes and invades our comment section on that Dolphins and Jets preview.
Oh my God. What a name. That's awesome. All right. Well, in all seriousness here, yes, this does have a lot of playoff ramifications in it. You did mention you think that the Titans may have just officially locked up their position in the AFC South. And I think a lot of it comes down to this weekend, because if they could get a win over the Steelers, and obviously we mentioned that the Colts are in a position where they could easily lose that game to the Patriots, that provides Tennessee enough leverage to officially basically clinch at that point, as they have a 2-game lead in the standings heading into this one. And they have the tiebreaker in addition, having beat the Colts twice. The Steelers, the funny thing about them, they're still not dead. They're still hanging around. It's like that game on Thursday night. You think they're dead, but they're really not. I still can't believe that one. I'm so hung up on that one, that game existed. The fact that they were down 29-0 and just out of nowhere. And the fact that Ben Roethlisberger put one on a string and it should have got caught by Pat Freiermuth in triple coverage, but it did not. And sadly, they revert back to 6-1 heading into this game. The only reason I say they still have a chance is because I look at their end of year schedule. We don't know what's going on long-term with this Lamar injury and how that will affect them. And the Steelers do still have one more head-to-head game against the Ravens, who they beat just as of 2 weeks ago. Going into Heinz Field, that's not an easy game for the Titans. I don't think the Titans are a team that just gets a scholarship going into any game, particularly on the road, especially with the inconsistencies that they've experienced ever since Derrick Henry has left their offense. Now having to rely on Ryan Tannehill, having to rely on a banged-up Julio Jones, who they finally got back. A.J. Brown, I think, is still 2 weeks away as of this recording, last I heard. And it really does feel like, I think you mentioned it earlier, the Dante Foreman show. So if you have him in fantasy, good. But
the 18-wheeler, the good old 18-wheeler, who I thought he was like 38 now, and he's like 25 years old, apparently.
Wasn't he one of the more famous incidents of a running back tearing their Achilles, if I'm not mistaken?
He might have been. I cannot confirm nor deny.
I believe he had an opportunity. In fact, I want to say Longhorn, right?
I believe he's the guy who scored that touchdown against Notre Dame a bunch of years ago that made everyone think that Texas was back.
Yes, I believe he came in with a lot of buzz, tore his Achilles, because I want to say he started with Houston. Either way, neither here nor there. The point is, that's kind of where Tennessee's offense is. They still want to win via the run game, but that's not necessarily how you beat the Steelers. The Steelers still have good pieces on defense that make it hard to run on them. So this is going to come down to a lot of the weight being carried by Ryan Tannehill, and he's reverted a little bit at times to Miami Ryan Tannehill. But hey, having throw to Des Westbrook or Des Fitzpatrick or NIW or whatever
Anthony
name
Ferkser.
they're throwing out there, practice squad after practice squad. Basically, the Titan season has been defined by injuries. Kyle, you did it to me. Gamesmanship. What are you going in this game?
I want to just do my entire analysis being just throwing out players who are on the Titans team now as their skill position players, because I believe we have a Chester Rogers somewhere in there. Former Colt great Chester Rogers is somewhere returning punts for the Titans. I will go to the other side because you touched very well on the offense versus defense conversation. I want to touch on the Steelers offense versus the Titans defense, because the thing the Titans have been really good at this year is pass rushing. And we talked about Jeffrey Simmons and Danico Autry a lot throughout the early part of the season. They obviously signed Bud Dupree. The Titans have really had injuries kind of decimate the defense that, again, was not very talented to start the season, but was outperforming expectations during that win streak when they were getting pick sixes on Matt Stafford. And that was just enough to win, even as Derrick Henry got injured and even as Julio Jones got injured, and they kept winning games. And the defense has gotten relatively healthy. This is the one game miraculously on the entire docket not affected by COVID. It looks like there's like 2 players for the Steelers and none for the Titans on the COVID list. So
thankfully for the Titans, if they got COVID, I could only imagine who they'd be starting this week.
Yeah, like the Titans are already playing down 13 players, so they're already at that disadvantage beforehand. But I think the key for this is blitz package over and over. Like, remember that one game on the Thursday night where the Ravens were playing the Dolphins and the Dolphins just blitz 7 the entire game on Lamar Jackson?
35 times blitzing.
Yeah, I think that strategy would be really effective. I know Dean Pease isn't the defensive coordinator in Tennessee anymore, but I just wanted to say Dean Pease because it's the best name for any coordinator in football. But whoever the defensive coordinator is now for the Tennessee Titans, I think the blitz strategy gives me hope for Tennessee in shutting down the Steelers offense. On the other side of that, I literally have no confidence at this point in the Tennessee Titans. I have minimal confidence in the Steelers, but against poor defenses, especially poor secondaries, the Pittsburgh Steelers have proven they can still move the ball effectively. The only 3 times the Steelers have scored more than 28 points in a football game over the past year plus, so going back to when they were 11-0, was the game against the Browns where they were down 28 points. The fourth quarter against the Chargers earlier this year where they scored 4 touchdowns, and the one quarter against the Vikings where they scored 4 touchdowns. It's the only time the Steelers have scored 28 points in a game is when they're down 28 points. They can move the ball enough against a poor defense, of which the Titans have. So I am going to take the Pittsburgh Steelers to win at home against the Tennessee Titans this week. Even though this would get them to 7-6-1, I still don't think the Steelers have a chance of making it to the playoffs in the AFC. Although, if you want to keep the 500 streak alive and get to 8-1, I think that's still in the realm of possibility for Pittsburgh this season.
That feels like such an odd record, but it feels like only one that can land with Mike Tomlin and the Steelers. And I have a lot of respect for Mike Tomlin. It just would feel like very appropriate. That would be the record in the first 17 game season of the NFL. We would literally get an 8-1 team. God, I'm not going to lie. Kind of hate you because I have to do it too. I'm going with the Steelers as well. I just have more faith in them at this point in the season for the reason, as I mentioned, between how the defense and the offense match up with the Tennessee Titans right now, with how many skill position players the Titans have had to burn throughout the year. I just don't think Ryan Tannehill is that same guy that like we saw when he first came to Tennessee. And I think obviously when you reduce his weapons, he's just not good enough to compensate out for it. He tends to make mistakes, and the Steelers will play good enough to burn you. Kind of wonder how that Chase Claypool situation is. Are we going to see him get punished at all? Like in terms of playing time? Can the Steelers afford to do that? Or is it just going to be like, well, learn from it, go out there? Is it going to be another Antonio Brown situation for them?
I think the whole thing was getting a little overhyped on the internet. I think the internet's just going a little too cuckoo with the Chase Claypool stuff.
It was 14 seconds of game time that they lost.
I know. Like, and Chase Claypool, if you've heard Ryan Clark talk about it, and he's very plugged in with the Steelers organization, like he was the one who was going after Antonio Brown before it was cool to go after Antonio Brown. Like he talked about how Chase Claypool like cares about himself way too much. And yeah, a lot of that stuff exists. And maybe Claypool plays into some of the stereotypes of a diva wide receiver. I would say it feels similar to the Juju Smith-Schuster stuff, except they're going after Claypool for different reasons than Juju Smith-Schuster. But I think this is something that lives on the internet more than it is something that actually bothers the Steelers at this point. I don't think it's seeped over that far on like he needs to be punished because he celebrated a first down and the ball happened to get knocked out of his hands and roll in the wrong direction. Because if the ball rolls towards the referee, they only lose 6 seconds, and we're not talking about this story. I'm sure it's probably going to be fine.
Speaking of coordinators that you want to name drop, I don't think we've had a chance to name drop Matt Canada on this podcast at all. So Matt Canada, let's see what kind of game plan you cook up, huh? Come on, eh?
Is Matt Canada going to get fired still? I know Steelers fans wanted to fire him a few weeks ago, and then they scored a bunch of points against the Bears.
The one thing I know that's always associated with Matt Canada is that he was the one coordinator that seemed to make Joe Burrow look bad.
That's true. That is a great point. I forgot about that.
So if there's any things like, is Ben Roethlisberger a dying corpse? Yes. But can he be slightly closer to alive under a different coordinator? Maybe. I don't know.
He's not. Ben Roethlisberger's not dying. He's been dead. He's been dead for 3 years now.
He looked alive on that throw. You got to give him that one.
Yes.
Freiermuth, if he came down with that one, that would have been like one of the greatest moments in NFL history.
That entire drive against the Vikings, I'm like, wait, he can throw 15-yard passes. And I'm like, oh, wait, it's the worst secondary in the NFL playing prevent defense. He's just doing practice throws.
I know we keep name dropping Skip on this one. I don't know how that's happened, but I thought he had a great point when talking about Ben Roethlisberger. Yes, his arm angle looks screwed up, but when he finds like a motion that he's comfortable with in a game, he can get it going. And that's what it looked like it happened in that game. If he can find that rhythm early on and they could get a lead on Tennessee, that takes away what Tennessee wants to do in terms of ground and pound, win with the run game. So that's another point in favor of the Steelers heading into this game.
I would like to say I've just Googled who the Tennessee Titans defensive coordinator is. Everyone listening to this should Google Shane Bowen. I thought Arthur Smith was the oldest looking 40-year-old in the history of sports. And then I just saw Shane Bowen. This man's Wikipedia photo makes me think that he was born in the backwoods of Kentucky in 1955. And apparently he is only 35 years old.
Oh my God, he's kind of going for a Ryan Fitzpatrick beard, ain't he?
Yeah, again, I think he's younger than Ryan Fitzpatrick. He's younger than Ryan Fitzpatrick with a gray beard, and he looks like he was born in the backwoods of Kentucky.
This is the type of coordinator, though, I want on Mike Vrabel coaching staff. If I think of a Mike Vrabel coaching staff, this is the only type of coordinator I want. A guy that looks like he literally just walked out from the backwoods in Kentucky.
Yes, either him or Dean Pease.